Okay, before we talk about router, let's spin up another server from scratch. First step. What's that?
Oh, you want npm? Okay. npm init
Yeah. Okay, good. So that creates our package.json, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what now?
Should we following
Yeah, let's just watch. You'll do an exercise that'll have this, and I'm recording as well.
Should we installing Express and body parser?
Okay, I'm going to show you another one called Morgan. It's just for, all it does is make your logs show up a little nicer when requests are made to your server. But it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so I've got those. Okay, so I'll create a server.js file.
And this was something with ports.
Port, yep.
Ports, one ports equal. Yeah. 3,000. We need to feed the object because we don't have anything yet, right?
Which object?
I mean, we need to feed something because we don't have database yet.
Oh, for the array. So we're going to skip that part, but I want the line that spins up my server now. Listen, yeah. Okay, good. Just kind of the basics of server spin up that we've done a number of times before, right?
You have to do app.use for body parser.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, let's add our middleware. I forgot about that. App.use body parser.json. And remember, I also got Morgan this time. So what I'm going to do is bring in Morgan. Acquire Morgan. And I'm going to have Morgan set up as middleware as well. And it takes a parameter that you can call dev just to let it know that you're doing a dev, like it's a dev environment still, a developer environment. You'll see there's a slight difference to what it does. It's kind of neat. It's helpful, but it's not necessary. Just is basically when a request is made to your server, it'll show up in your log and it'll say like, it was a post request to this endpoint and it took this long to complete. That's about it. Okay, how do I run my server? Dustin, how do I run my server?
NodeMon.
NodeMon. Server.js. Okay, and how can I test this?
I'm gonna say Rocket Man.
Rocket Man? Postman? It's because he's on a rocket.
He looks like he has rockets on his
Yeah, he's got a rocket.
and his boots too.
And his helmet. Yeah.
So I'm always like Rocket Man.
Okay, we're on, I think, 3,000. And what's going to happen if I submit a request here?
It's probably just gonna freeze.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't have, I think it'll actually respond saying like, I don't know how to get, cannot get slash, right?
Is Chris getting that election?
I don't know.
What?
There's like.
Oh,
six
the
lines.
So I'm going to just create a get handler. I do this kind of as a sanity check.
Sorry.
You okay?
I'm just sore.
Okay, just to see that it's working. Do res.send, it's working. And then I'll hit send again. Okay, it's working, we're good. All right, so I wanna show you what we've been doing so far is we've been adding all of our handlers on the app itself, right? App.get, app.get1, or well, it's just still .get, but with an ID, right? App.post, .delete, .put. Well, if we had like all those same resources, do you remember when we looked at the Trello API? Remember all the different resources it had? Had like users and cards and boards and organizations and all of those, and each one of those has a number of endpoints written for them. So if we were to do that in Express on our server.js file, it would just get super huge, right? So imagine I'm a gardener and I'm writing endpoints for /vegetables. Let's do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to have vegetables /:ID, post, put, delete, /:ID.
Did you create multiple cursors and website?
I think it's the option key. Yeah, if you hold option. Okay, so there's like all my handlers for the vegetables, and now I'm going to do the same thing for fruits.
Why do you have multiple instead of the same? Just because.
Well, it's a get, post, get
Oh,
one,
sorry, I
put, and
understand.
delete. Yeah. Fruits. Okay, and then imagine I also had, I don't know, I was like a rancher and I had different cuts of meat or different animals or I don't know, whatever. Like all of a sudden my server.js file is already 53 lines and that's without putting any code inside any of these. Instead of putting our routes on the app directly, Express decided this is not, very modular, and what they did is they created a router. And with a router, you can, you can set the router up as middleware and it will just work with your routes. So I'll show you the syntax for that, and then we're going to clean it up and turn it into a separate module. Okay? So we have var, let's say vegetable routes equals express.router. And I execute that as a function. Vegetable routes becomes an object where I can put my get, post, put, delete handlers on the same way that I had before. So I can take vegetable routes, and everywhere I see app on the vegetables, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can put vegetable routes dot whatever
Instead of app? Okay.
instead of app. And obviously right now this is not saving us any space or anything. But it will in a second. And then I'm going to do the same with the fruit routes. Var fruit routes equals express.router. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fruit routes. Any questions so far? It's basically kind of like an intermediary object where we're just putting the handlers on this route object, the router object.
What is this process called?
Routification. I just made that up. It's adding routes to your, or I guess using a router is probably the best thing to call it. Okay, so in order to make this more modular, I'm going to take all of my vegetable routes and I'm going to put them in their own module. Okay, so up in my main folder here, my router, well, this is called router, but that's just the project. I'm going to make a new directory called routes. And inside of routes, I'm going to make a new JavaScript file for every series of routes. So I'll have like vegetable routes. And I'm also going to make a fruit routes file.
Is there a way to prevent it from automatically saying created by?
Yeah, there's a setting in the, I always have to do a Google search, but there's a setting to just delete that. I wonder if I can just search here. Somewhere. Yeah, I always just have to do a Google search and remove it. I forget where it is. I'm going to pull these over here. Okay, and I'm just going to take this vegetable routes code and cut it and put it in my vegetable routes.js. I'm going to take my fruit routes code, cut it, and put it in fruit routes.js. Okay, already my server.js file is looking much nicer. Now, what kinds of issues am I going to face? Like, what do you see as being an issue with just throwing it in there and then being like, we're done, like, let's try and make it work?
Nothing requires it.
Yeah, so I put this in a different module, but at no point have I connected my server to that file, right? Or pulled that file into my server.js file. Okay, what about just with the syntax? Like, what errors do you see that will run here? In fact, WebStorm is trying to tell me there's an error. Except for this, I don't understand why it doesn't know how to handle post, put, and delete. Oh. Well, it's closer. Okay, what problems do you see with this line right here?
You're not exporting.
So yeah, well, that's one thing I have to do. I have to export vegetable routes. So actually, we might as well just do that now. I have to say module.exports equals vegetable routes. Okay, so that sets it up so that I can require it from somewhere. Okay, but what's wrong with this first line?
Doesn't know what Express is.
Yeah, it doesn't know what Express is. I have to remind it what Express is by adding that require Express line. So I had written this line in my server.js where I had already required Express, so a new Express.router. But when I moved it over here, it no longer had a reference to what express was, so I have to require express in this file.
How does it grab all of them though? Is it because it has vegetable routes at the beginning of each one?
Yeah, so
Is
because
that
I
what's grabbing it?
because I put the get, post, put, delete on this vegetable routes object.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's not exactly putting it on object because this is a method, but it does. It adds it to vegetable routes, and then when I export the entirety of vegetable routes, it has all of those handlers together. Boy, it's really hard to do vertical splitting here. It's just not good. There we go. And I have to do the same for my fruit routes as well. And export my fruit routes. Okay, then to make these connect, I can set up my routes as middleware on my server. And so I can say app.use, app.use, and then I need to require my fruit routes, what's going to be my path to the fruit routes.
Routes /
Yeah, remember I need // Why do I need //
to only search the current directory.
Yeah, because it's a
Node modules.
yeah, it's a module that we've written. Routes / fruit routes. And then I'm also going to do vegetable routes as well. Okay, so already my server it only has 2 lines that are pulling in those other routes that I wrote. And all those routes can be in their own files separately, which is really nice. Makes my server JS a lot cleaner. Any questions about how it's working? Seth, what's the benefit of doing it this way?
I'm not sure.
Not sure. So do you remember what our server.js file looked like before? Let's see. Close these ones. So this is our server.js file now. And this is what it looked like before. Oh, that's what it looked like before.
So it consolidates it.
Yeah, it consolidates it. So if you think about like I was saying, if you're a farmer and you have like vegetables and you have fruits, but then you also have like, I don't know why you're a farmer and you're making an API of your stuff, but you have like chickens and cows and sheep and ducks and horses, and you need an endpoint for every single one of those. Like this is going to be unmaintainable. It's going to end up being like thousands and thousands of lines long, right? And so one of the benefits we get is we get to put each route into its own file, and it gets to separately be kind of its own thing. So then all I have to do is I set up middleware that says also, like while you're reading through and setting up these middleware functions and everything, also make sure you're looking at fruit routes just in case there's an incoming request to, something that starts with /fruit or is /fruit. So if I go to, okay. Let me open up my fruit routes, and in my get, I'll say like res.send, here's a bunch of fruit. And then I'm just going to do a get request to /fruits. Okay, so my routes are still working. My routes are still working, but they're in a separate file. Okay. Now, the server's going to read just like JavaScript does in the browser, where it goes from the top down. So if I make a request to /vegetables, or what did I call it? /vegetables. Let me do a GET request. Let's say res.send. Here's some veggies. Vegetables. Okay, here's some veggies. But try to think like how the computer would think, okay? So it's going to read through this file, and it's going to say, every time there's an incoming request, it's gonna read through this, and it's gonna say, should I use, or it's gonna say, I should use Morgan, so I should do some logging. By the way, this is what Morgan did. It just added that line to my server. When the request came in, it says, hey, there was just a GET request to /vegetables. I returned a status 200, and it took 4.63 milliseconds, and I'm not sure what this last part is. Okay, that's all Morgan's doing. It's nothing super advanced.
Is that all Morgan does?
Yeah,
Why it just prints that out?
yeah. It's mostly just for like helping see what's going on a little better, debugging sort of. Okay, so trying to think of the best way to describe this.
When I name one of my files, it converts it from JavaScript to like syntax. It's really weird in WebStorm.
When you rename one of your files?
Yeah, I can't name it vegetable routes or something. Yeah. It does. Weird. It was a JS file, and then I didn't like the name, so I went in and changed it. Changed it. It's not like that.
Because you renamed it in your Finder.
I mean, it was like that before, so that's why I did it in Finder. Like,
Right click the file and say vector.
it doesn't like vegetables.
No, I bet if you rename it, if you refactor rename it in WebStorm again, it'll be funny. I've never seen that. Or if you like shut down WebStorm and start it back up, it might have recognized it as a JS file.
Sorry. Why?
Okay, this will be a little bit of like a recap of middleware as well. So think of, well, somebody tell me what middleware is. Jordan, what is middleware?
Middleware is something that runs in between, that's an explanation. It's essentially it's like a function. Everything will stop until like that's run and says, okay, you can keep going through to do whatever original request that you had.
That's
Yeah.
what you do with next, right?
So yeah, in a middleware function, next will send you on to whatever next piece of middleware there is to run. I always think of it as being in the middle of an incoming request and an outgoing response. So you have an incoming request to a server, and there's something, at some point it's going to send back a response. And there's just a bunch of code that runs in between, like a series of function calls that run in between, and they all say, I'm done, you can go, your turn, and just goes down until finally one of them says res.send. Right? So middleware is just all of these guys in the middle. So, do you remember the difference between the path that you put in app.use and the path, so here, this it's called a mount path. Do you remember the difference between the path here and the path here?
One people was like tapping blah 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 in our local ones, and it was yeah.
Not quite. I think you're thinking of the query string, maybe? I type blah, 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 blah a lot, so I'm not sure which time it was. Does anyone remember? It's slight.
Mine is a pound sign. No,
What's that?
pound sign.
Well, I know the difference
No.
between use and get is like, you use this whenever it, so like, if it's whatever slash whatever slash whatever, it's gonna use it regardless because it starts off with whatever.
That's right.
While get, it has to be the exact
Yeah, that's exactly right. So app.use, this mount path here is just the beginning of the request. So when I say app.use slash whatever, it's going to say any request that starts with slash whatever, then you should use fruit routes. Okay, so for example, I might say, well, actually, let's look at this. So if I were to write it this way, I were to say app.use slash whatever fruit routes, is this going to work now? This request to slash fruits. It's not going to work anymore. And it's going to say, I don't know how to get slash fruits. The reason is we are only requiring fruit routes, which has our handlers for slash fruits, if the request starts with slash whatever. Does that make sense? Michelle, explain that back to me.
They don't. That's really sick. I mean, I get that you're saying slash whatever is now like the new thing that you have to search for when you put in what's the word?
The request?
Yeah, or
URL?
like the yeah, exactly. I don't know how to do that.
Okay, yeah, you're like halfway there. So if I'm only requiring fruit routes if the request starts with slash whatever, and fruit routes is where I handle the get request to slash fruits, the way that they've set it up with Express is like, okay, well, if you do this and get rid of that, then it says, yeah, just always get ready to handle routes for fruits that start with slash fruits and slash fruit slash ID and so forth. Which is why this works. Now, if I take out that slash whatever, I get my fruit. But if
So
I,
do you have to do slash whatever and then slash fruits?
Yeah.
For it to work? Is that
Exactly.
what it is? Okay.
yeah, so if I wanted to use the fruit route or the fruit router, whatever, these routes over here, then I have to start my request with slash whatever in this case. So let's do this again. Send, it fails because it no longer, now it says slash whatever. But if I add slash whatever beforehand, I get my fruits again. So it kind of like builds on top of it. Okay, I don't know that this is true, but in my mind, what happens if I don't put something in here? Let's say I search for a vegetable. Again, I don't know that this is actually how Express is doing it, but it seems like Express is going to try and find it in this file first, in the fruit routes, because I told on every request, search through the fruit routes. And it uses and searches through the fruit routes and it says, no, it wasn't there. So then it says, okay, well, also on every request, search for the vegetable routes. and then it goes, oh yes, I found it. It's in that second one, but I wasted my time in the first one. So what I like to do, and this kind of helps me set up like a little table of contents on my server, is I say if the request starts with /fruits, then handle fruit routes. If the request starts with /vegetables, then require vegetable routes. Okay, so what issues does that create if I have /fruits here and /fruits here in both places?
You have no /fruits.
Yeah, so this means that my GET request is now /fruits, which is silly, right? That's working. And so what I do is if I handle it in the mount path in the app.use, then I just go through my fruit routes and I say, I've already assumed that I'm handling the /fruits part. And I go through and I delete the /fruits from my fruit routes. Does that make sense? By the time it gets to this file, it has already assumed that you're starting it with /fruits. So I don't need to double it up here. So I just get rid of it.
That's also to help keep the use from running before it's even needed. Is that what you were saying?
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I just realized you had split screens.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was like, why do we still have those in the thingy that we moved them all?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we can delete, do we delete the whole portion?
Just the part where it said /fruit right here.
Okay.
/fruits. But yeah, you're right. So because I'm already app.use is already saying you're only going to require the fruit routes if the request starts with /fruits. If I do a request to /vegetables, then it's going to be reading down, it's going to be reading down, it's going to get here and it's going to say, nope, skip this one entirely. And then it's going to go here and it's going to say, hey, yeah, it does start with /vegetables. Let's go see if this is where my handler is. And then it's going to go into vegetable routes. And again, I don't know that it saves time. In my mind, it's like, oh yeah, that seems logical, like it saves time. And so I kind of like doing this way. And it gives me, like I said, a little table of contents that says I can kind of just look through, you know, I maybe have like 10 or 15 of these at the most, hopefully, and I can say, let me look down my list, oh yep, there's like /cows, and then I go look at the cow routes, and it just tells me like where to find stuff. Questions? Sorry, the split screen was confusing.
No, it's okay. So basically this is just like best practice to like delete stuff from our routes that have the / things. And put that in the required portion. It makes more sense to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, to me it does.
Because of the way that it reads everything. That way it doesn't read both of them, right?
Yeah, like I said,
That's the way to do it.
that's
the reasoning behind it.
that's my reasoning behind it. I haven't like done a, I should do this actually. I should put breakpoints and see if it's reading through, you know, the fruit routes, even though I did a vegetables call. If I don't have these, I should try that sometime just to see if it actually does try to look through every route. I have a feeling that it's smarter than that, and it actually, like when you do or when you run the server for the very first time, it like figures all that out and it says it's going like only go to the right place. But I don't know. I just like doing it this way personally, and it's pretty common.
Wait, it's pretty common.
It just in examples, like when you look up example code on Express. Okay, well, what if I wanted to make it so I ran a middleware? Let's say I want to start all of my APIs endpoints with /API. You know how we've seen that in like the Pokemon API? It says, it's like Pokemon with pokeapi.co/API/v2 or something like that. let's say I want to kind of mimic that idea and say this is an API endpoint. So I'm going to start it with /API. Okay, first off, what do I need to change my request to? Yeah, so I need to add the /API before it, and then /fruits, so that I'm getting this one right here. And there's my bunch of fruits, so I know it's working. Let's check the vegetables. Uh-oh.
You can change it in,
Oh, I haven't changed it in the vegetable routes. Yeah, so as it stands right now, you open vegetable routes and go into a split screen again. I'm starting the request. I'm saying anytime it starts with /API/vegetables, look at the vegetable routes, and then the vegetable routes say, yeah, and then if it continues with another /vegetables, you know, res.send, here's some veggies. So because I forgot to delete these, I would have to say API/vegetables/vegetables in order to get my veggies. So I'm going to delete those. Oops. No.
Oh.
Is it working? Okay, what was I going for? Oh, okay, but let's say I also want to, this is pretty contrived, but let's say I want to console log something like user is accessing the API every time they make a request that starts with /API. So anytime a request, an incoming request starts with /API, I want to console log accessing the API.
Would you do API in there, or would you do it in your route?
So if I technically could do it in my routes, I'd have to write a console log on every handler, right? All 10 of them.
you
Okay.
can just do the use, right?
Okay, so
Use
so yeah, let's look at that. App.use.
/API.
Yeah, so why am I doing /API?
Because you're gonna use this whenever a route is the API.
Uh-huh.
And then and then function, right? And then rec response next.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Why do I need next?
Because next, what's gonna happen is as soon as you do the call an API, it's going to console log what it is you want to say, and then it's gonna hit next, and it's gonna go into the next use or.
Do you have to write that above your other app use?
That's what I was getting to next.
Okay.
You're too smart.
Yeah, call next.
Okay, so if I forget to put next, what's gonna happen?
So freeze.
Yeah, I'll do my request to /API/vegetables. And it's like, okay. But notice that it did console log accessing the API like I told it to. But because I don't have next, it doesn't know how to move on. So I'm gonna say next. I'm gonna do my call again. I get a response. Here's some veggies. And I get my middleware to run. Okay, so Michelle, what's going to happen if I put this below?
Well, what do we normally just put it in another folder file? General?
This function? We could, yeah,
Yeah,
we could.
like
But
the middleware is supposed to be in its own folder.
yeah, it probably should be.
Okay.
But even if I put it in its own folder and required it right here,
Yeah.
but put it below these two, I guess like raise your hand if you think it will console log accessing the API still.
Is it because, I mean, middleware has to happen before it goes through the other one, because it's already, I kind of.
You just tried it, didn't you? Oh.
Yes, because
It's not even gonna hit it,
the
right?
routing is accessing an endpoint and it's giving us back something that we are asking for, therefore it's not getting hit.
Let's try it. So that should restart. Oops. Postman, send. And look at that. Yeah, it's not there. So your series of middleware does matter what order you put it in. If you want something to run before you get to your routes, then you want to make sure to require it and app.use it above your route handlers. There's going to be a point where we do something like this when we do user authentication. We're going to say, instead of console logging something, we're going to use a package called ExpressJot. And we're going to. Oh, is it, yeah. JWT is short for JSON Web Token, but it's pronounced JOT for some reason, because it's easier. We're going to use this package called ExpressJot, which you don't really need to worry too much about right now what it does, other than it authenticates the user and makes sure that they're logged in. And what this says is if there's ever going to be somebody accessing or incoming request that starts with /API, you need to make sure that they're logged in. The reason being, imagine it's like a to-do website. Like if you hold a database of all the to-dos from all your users, you don't want somebody who's not logged in to go in, do a GET request for all of them, and just see everybody's to-dos. That's not a good user experience, it's not good security, and so forth, right? So they're gonna get back this huge list of to-dos. It's like, well, it makes business sense to require them to be logged in to do a GET request to our API, or any kind of request to our API. Okay? So then you say, if the request starts with /API, use ExpressJot to, and ExpressJot will like send a response back that says you're not logged in if they're not logged in. So anyway, that's an instance where we're going to use that in a few weeks. A couple weeks. Next week?
Oh no.
I think it's next week. User authentication. Okay. What questions do you have about the router? This was getting back to middleware, but routers are just middleware that you set up.
Does middleware usually, sorry, go ahead, Jordan.
No, it's, I'm just making sure that I understand. So like, routers are just essentially the same thing as just using another module for something.
Yeah, it's like its own little middleware that gets set up, and you use it the same way that you do middleware.
And it just makes it alone.
Yeah, and easier to maintain, right? If it's in different files rather than one file.
So when you return at the bottom of the vegetable routes, you return vegetable routes?
I export it.
So, but you can use that like it's a function? Because when you require it, you can also put the function there. That takes. Yeah.
Yeah, the get's happening in that folder.
Oh yeah, so the .get is happening here.
And if you scroll up to the top, the var vegetable routes is equal to express router. So it's saying everything that starts with vegetable routes. Like instead of app.get, app.post, you're using vegetable routes, so you can export every single one of those.
Yeah, so vegetable routes is an object that has those functions on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I do this line, it is returning a new object with these methods built into them.
Require, you could also just, so say in vegetable routes JavaScript, you just return get, or you export it, just one of those get functions.
It's everything in that folder.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like you can also just export one of those get functions and get rid of everything else and have that file. All it can do is get. Not using routers. Could you do that?
No. As far as I know, you couldn't. I mean, this isn't me writing a new function called .get. This is me executing a function that already exists on the router. call.get and telling it what function to run as a callback function when that route is met. Like when that route is.
App.use knows how to handle routers when it gets to, when the second parameter of app.use is
A router instance.
router knows what to do.
Yeah, so me adding these methods basically is like building up the executing this method is like saying, okay, now vegetable routes know how to do this, and now vegetable routes know how to handle a post to just the slash, and to get to something with an ID and so forth. And I've like kind of built this router that I then just export and require here. And yeah, app.use says, oh, this is a router, so I'm going to look at this for routes. And it handles those endpoints.
I had a question on middleware.
Mhm.
Do we do anything with middleware that ever does anything other than with like the console?
Yeah, so like this example right here,
User authentication.
with user authentication, this is, I mean, somebody else wrote this middleware,
Oh, okay.
it's, I didn't install this. This is what this will look like when we do it. But this is an example of middleware that says,
It'll like return something for you.
yeah,
Like
so
a status error or something.
exactly, yeah. So if you have an incoming, request, let's talk about ExpressJot specifically. That package ExpressJot will look for, like, you know how you have access cards to this building, and like when you tap in, it like registers who you are to some computer somewhere in the building. ExpressJot kind of does the same thing. It says like, whoa, 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 kind of like a bodyguard. It's like, whoa, whoa, not a bodyguard, bouncer. Whoa, whoa, I don't know who you are. Like, show me some credentials. And what we're going to do in Angular is we're going to attach this token, which really is just a string of a ton of characters. It's like 50 characters or something long. We're going to attach that, and ExpressJot is going to say, let me see the token. And it's going to take that token, and it's going to like verify that it's valid, that it's a legitimate like access card to this building, so to speak, the server. And inside of ExpressJot, it says, if it's a valid token, next. Like, okay, you can go forward to the next middleware. If it's not a valid token, then it says, no, like res.send, res.status 403 unauthorized.send, like this is not a valid token. And it cuts off the progress in the server from there. So that's an example of middleware that we'll use.
Will we ever write like our own that does anything? Like it's not posting anything or I don't know. I'm just.
They're usually
middleware
pretty
is
simple
all,
functions.
Like back end like stuff.
Uh-huh.
That's part, okay.
Yeah, everything here is all backend stuff. This
Okay.
is all server side stuff.
Okay.
Another thing that you might do is say like, I don't know, let's say you /API/admin. Okay, so anything that the request starts with /API/admin, like it requires you to be an administrator, then use this middleware function, which normally, like you said earlier, we would write in a different file, but let's just pretend that we're doing it here. Oops. Okay, so if the request starts with /API/admin, check the user object and say if the current user, which we're going to see rec.user later, but if the current user .is admin equals false, then we're going to say like, whoa, you are unauthorized. 403 is the status code for unauthorized. You are unauthorized. Send. Get out of here. Okay. Otherwise, if they are an admin, then we just allow them forward. And this would probably. Better way to write that one. So that's an example of a really simple one that you might write that says like, we want to make sure that they're an admin before we allow them access, like to do a GET request of like all the users' information or all of the to-dos in the database. Because if they aren't an admin and they access that stuff, then they could just screw everybody else's data up.
But basically, that's what ExpressLab JW2. Is it .jw2 or just J?
Just Express. I mean, this will, yeah, you'll see this when we do authentication.
Yeah. Okay.
It's, there's more to this line than that as well. Those are all great questions. Any other questions? We kind of like touched on middleware again. Vegetable routes, like the router is just middleware. That's all it really is. Feel free, as practice, what I would do if I were you is go back to some of these other servers that you've written and use routes, like create a router. I'll send this code. And this is recording, so I'll put this on YouTube. Yeah. What's everyone working on right now? Portfolio. A few of you working on portfolio. What was that?
Assignments.
Assignments in general. Just, cool. I want to do, because it's the like another quarter has passed, I want to do another series of one-on-ones. If anybody is interested, be happy to like sit down and go over any assignments that we've done. Just make sure that everyone's comfortable with like the progress that we're doing and nobody's feeling too like far behind and getting too overwhelmed with stuff. Does that sound good? It's 11:48 right now, so I'm probably not going to start one right now. But after lunch, I can maybe do one or two, and then we'll do an introduction to MongoDB, so we can start learning databases. Yeah, databases are best. So, okay. So we keep working on projects till lunchtime in about 10 minutes, and then after lunch, we'll start that stuff.